Proximity by Great 78. Chapter 11. Chicanery. Still Saturday, 14 August 2010. The display bay windows of Delval Jewelers were dark, the bright summer sunshine unable to penetrate the murky space beyond the empty display spaces. Had Draco not known that they were operational because of this investigation, he might have assumed they'd closed permanently. Thus far, the Aura Department was uncertain whether the old couple who ran the place were actively involved in the diamond fence scheme orchestrated by Castigliano. But from Eleonora's description of their current business structure, Draco had his doubts. Looking first left and then right, Draco finished his apple, then vanished the core, moving as though to approach the shop. Just then, from behind him, a familiar voice called out to him. "Ferret! Is that you? Godric's ass! Look at you in Hufflepuff yellow! I'd have never pegged you for pastels!" Salazar's ass, he thought. Pym was never allowed near his wardrobe again. Draco turned, pasting on a false smile. "Ginevra, lovely to see you as always. What, did you lose one?" he asked, gesturing to her side where one of her two sons held her hand tightly. Ginny rolled her eyes. "No, Pratt. Albus contracted whatever James had last week, so Harry stayed home with him. This week is James's birthday, so we're going out for lunch." Her free hand moved from rubbing lazy circles on her pregnant belly to massaging her lower back. "I's 4 years old," James said proudly, pointing at his chest. Draco smiled. "I've got 26 on you." "Taunting a literal child now, Ferret. How am I not surprised?" Ginny laughed. "Well, he looks so much like his father, how can I not? Some of my favourite childhood memories are scrapping with Potter. I've got the scars to prove it." Draco gestured vaguely to his chest. Jenny chuckled again. "Come on, we're going to lunch. You're buying." He checked his pocket watch. It was barely 10 in the morning. That being said, though he had no personal experience with this, common sense told him that arguing with a pregnant woman was futile. And so he fell into step with the pair of them, walking next to the young boy. To his complete shock, the tiny wizard reached his hand up to hold Draco's. He struggled not to recoil, not only because of the hot stickiness of the child's palm, but because of the mere fact that it was a child at all. Having not grown up around children, Draco found it odd that this little one could be so trusting. His only real experience with children was with his young cousin, Teddy. Draco had missed Teddy's toddler years, having not reconciled with his Aunt Andromeda until the boy was nearly 7. Now, Draco was happy to play the role of older uncle, occasionally going over for a game of Pass the Quaffle, or else taking him to Diagon for the day. But Teddy was long past the days of wishing to hold an adult's hand. The trio turned in at Riddock's, Guildford's best ice cream parlour. "I thought we were going for lunch," Draco asked. Ginny flashed him a determined look. "I have been craving chocolate ice cream, with fresh blueberries, dried currant, bacon, and crushed toffee bits mixed in for 3 days. If I say it's lunch, it's bloody well lunch." "Understood," Draco said agreeably, opening the door for the pair of them. "Thank you," Ginny said, stepping inside and immediately dropping into a chair at the nearest table with all of the grace of a bludger. "Merlin, I don't know how my mother did this 6 times." 5 minutes later, James dove into his Knickerbocker glory with all of the gusto of 3 children, eating only a few bites before he declared himself full. Then he wandered off to a nearby wall, striking up a nonsensical conversation with another child and a creepy painting of a sad clown. This left the 2 adults quite alone. I hear happy tidings are in order, Ginny said lightly.
What do you mean?
Draco asked, spooning a large bite of his pink confection into his mouth to avoid saying more. The word is you're engaged. He lifted one eyebrow. Who's spreading the word? She matched his expression. Hermione, for one.
Really?
Oh, yes. She says lots of things, you know. Ginny fixed him with a pointed stare, and Draco had the feeling that the lots of things that Granger had shared potentially included a handful of recent events. He stayed quiet, but like any Weasley worth her salt, Ginny had to fill the silence. So, tell me what's going on.
Not sure what you mean,
Draco said, avoiding her brown eyes. Well, let's see. These past few years, every time I see the two of you together, you are drooling over her.
I do not drool,
he objected. And then, after the last winter ministry gala, according to Harry, the two of you minced around each other at the office as though you were both afraid of the other.
I don't mince either.
She swallowed a bite of her odd concoction, wiping at her lips. You mince, and you drool, Ferret. I've seen you do it. And if that wasn't enough, last week you slobbered all over her in that alleyway, and then didn't even have the common decency to call her the next day.
She ran away from me. What was I to do, beat down her door?
It wouldn't have killed you, Ginny said, turning her spoon and licking it with the flat of her tongue.
She might have killed me, showing up unannounced that way,
Draco pointed out. The witch considered, and then relented. Possibly. But then, to make it worse, you do it again. Except this time your big move was to ask her to come over to your flat, to witness your literal engagement.
Salazar's ass. It sounds so much worse when you say it out loud that way, he grumbled.
It's just the facts, Malfoy. There's no other way to put it. So, what are you going to do about it now?
Draco shook his head. She doesn't want me to do anything about it. And besides, like you said, I'm engaged.
Ginny lifted one eyebrow. My sources say you and your fiancé have agreed to hold off on making things public and official just yet.
He frowned. Exactly who are your sources?
Never mind all that. Somehow, despite the fact that you were a complete asshole to her, not only in our youth, but as recently as last week, you've still got a shred of a chance with her. What are you going to do about it? Draco tugged at the knit of his atrocious yellow jumper, trying to work a thread free.
There's no chance. There's nothing to be done. She's angry at me, rightfully so. And I'm engaged, even if it's not official in the papers.
The red-haired witch shook her head. Listen, it took me a lot to convince Hermione to give you a chance in the first place. Both of his eyebrows lifted in shock, but Draco didn't interrupt. I mean, it was obvious that you were into her, and you're no longer a completely atrocious human being. You flatter me, he interjected, and as much as I'm loath to admit it, the two of you would be good together. Not to mention, she's always thought you were somewhat fit. His mouth fell open so quickly that a bit of strawberry ice cream escaped onto his chin. See, I told you, you drool.
She always thought I was fit, he demanded.
Ginny corrected. Somewhat fit. But after the last ministry gala, I think she started looking at you differently. I mean, that was the first time she saw something, I don't know, more substantial, more mature about you. He twisted his napkin and his fingers, thinking about her words, about the evening that he and Hermione had shared several months ago. At the time, it had felt like a turning point in their relationship, but he'd always assumed that his feelings were one-sided. Draco spoke so quietly that Ginny almost did not hear him.
I don't know what to do to fix this.
Ginny shrugged. You could start by apologizing.
I've tried, he protested. "I mean to her face, not in some half-assed letter," the ginger witch scoffed. Sure, absolutely. I tried the other day in the conference room. Is that when you practically called her a mudblood?" He drew himself upright, quietly outraged. "I can assure you, I outgrew using that kind of language many years ago, and I find hearing it offensive, if you don't mind." The witch was silent for a moment before nodding her agreement. "All right. Sorry to accuse." Apology accepted. "But I didn't think before I spoke. I was talking about the kinds of constraints that we purebloods face, the pressures put upon us. I only meant to say that she was lucky to not have to live under those same strictures. Hell, even you don't fully understand. I'm sure neither of your parents had any problems with you marrying a half-blood." Ginny continued to eye him for a moment before nodding her understanding. "Believe it or not, regarding your specific situation, I do understand what you mean better than you think. And I believe your heart is in the right place, what you're trying to do with this engagement." He tilted his head in confusion, but said nothing, because Ginny was continuing. "But you've got to make amends to Hermione. The four of you are a team, and you can't very well work together effectively with all of this between the two of you." Draco nodded. "I really have tried to tell her that I'm sorry."
"I think this goes beyond just telling her, Ferret. You need to show it. And you need to show her that you've changed. Show her the man she danced with at that gala. Don't continue to be the playboy asshole from the gossip rags. Let her see that you're a better person."
He nodded. "I will."
James ran back to their table, apparently bored with the nattering conversation he'd been having with the clown painting. To Draco's complete surprise, the little boy jumped into his lap instead of his mother's, though, to be fair, with her pregnancy bump, there wasn't nearly as much lap as there typically was, he imagined. Draco reflexively put out 2 hands to steady the child and keep him from falling. The little boy studied him solemnly. "Your hair is funny," he pronounced.
"Thank you," Draco said stiffly, as Ginny squawked her laughter. Back out on the pavement, Draco was preparing to bid the 2 Potters goodbye, when the little boy tugged at his trouser leg and pointed. "That's the man that Daddy doesn't like," James pronounced. Draco followed his finger, spotting Bozo on the sidewalk. Rita Skeeter's right-hand man and personal photographer, Bozo had done very little to endear himself to Draco, either. "I don't care much for him myself," Draco said. "What's he poking around for?" asked Ginny. The annoying wizard had a new, state-of-the-art camera to his face, snapping quick photos of Draco and Ginny with James. The witch pulled her little boy behind her, shielding him from view of the camera, as Draco grimaced. "And how did he manage to afford that fancy camera? That had to cost a mint." Draco answered with a sneer directed at Bozo. "If I had to hazard a guess, I would say it cost right around 600 galleons. The blasted camera kept up a steady pace of clicks. Ginny grumbled, "Excellent. I suppose tomorrow's headlines will be speculating as to whether you, and not Harry, are the cause of my impending motherhood." Just then the photographer raised his wand, conjuring a moray eel Patronus. He whispered to the silver beast, which swam across the street, passing through the front door of Scales and Tails. Draco and Ginny turned, and through the window they could just make out Rita's blonde head, tucked close to Eleonora's. That had not taken long at all, Draco thought with smug satisfaction. He turned back to the witch. "I think we're in luck. Rita has bigger fish to catch, I believe." Following his gaze, Ginny spotted the 2 witches and frowned in confusion. "What's that all about, then?" "I've just been sowing the seeds, is all." laying a bit of groundwork for next week's assignment in Spain.
Well, carry on then. And thanks for lunch,
Ginny called as she tugged James towards the flue in the nearby pub called the Bronze Sickle. You really should consider something more nutritious. I believe that place has eggs and sausage on special, he called to her retreating back.
I'm the one giving advice here, Ferret, and I'd advise you to take mine. Fix this,
Ginny responded in a stern tone. Draco nodded shortly, then moved towards Del Val Jewelers, knocking on the shuttered door. He made sure to turn a bit to his left, so that Bozo could get his best side. The door creaked open, revealing the darkened showroom of the little shop. The elderly, stooped wizard inside bobbed his head with a long-toothed grin.
"Aetius, lovely seeing you after all these years, my dapper young man,"
the old man said, a misty twinkle in his eyes. Sorry, no, I'm Lucius's son, Draco. Pleasure to make your acquaintance, Mr.
Del Val, good sir. That's my husband, Emilio, and I'm Beatrice. My stars, you do look like your father,
a reedy witch's voice said from the shadows that lingered in the back of the shop. She stepped out slowly, fixing him with a shrewd stare as she limped his way.
Of course, we haven't seen Lucius in at least 15 years. Azkaban, isn't that right?
Draco gave the older witch a tight smile. He's out these last 3 years, actually.
I see, the woman said. I suppose he paid the right person, finally. Some things never change. Well, young Mr. Malfoy, what can we do for you?
I'm in the market for an engagement piece. He began his rehearsed words smoothly. My witch has simple, elegant tastes, so I'd like something with clean lines. Not understated, you understand. I want it to be the best that money can buy. The witch was quiet for so long that Draco began to wonder if she'd heard him. Behind him the older wizard Emilio shuffled about, grunting occasionally.
Nothing acceptable in that massive vault of yours?
The witch asked. Mostly gone from reparations, I'm afraid, he said smoothly, borrowing Eleonora's idea as his own. Frankly, he was a little annoyed that he and Robards had not thought of it themselves.
That's codswallop, and you know it as well as I do, Mr. Malfoy,
she wheezed.
Back after the war, Emilio and I were called to Gringotts to certify gemstones and precious metals collections that were seized for reparations from several vaults, including your own. But the family heirloom pieces weren't touched, and I remember your vault being quite full of those. Now, tell me why you're really here.
Damn it. Of course Del Val had been involved in all that business back then. Draco had been serving his probationary sentence at home and completing his 8th year of school by correspondence, and had not known the particulars of things back then. He allowed himself only a quick breath before offering his original excuse, the one that he and Robards had invented. Most of the items in my vault are imbued with rather dark magic. They might present a challenge when given to the witch I've chosen to marry. Beatrice went quiet once again, pondering his words. Then she said gently to her husband,
Emilio, fetch us some tea, love.
She waited until the man had doddered off into the back of the shop before she spoke.
Mr. Malfoy, I'm quite familiar with wizards of your sort. The apple, as they say, does not fall far from the tree. I feel as though any witch you've been instructed by your mother and father to choose as your wife would, by her very blood, be perfectly capable of wearing anything within the Malfoy vaults, if you understand me.
Draco shook his head. No, madam, I assure you she cannot. Her blood status would likely prevent her from wearing anything in there."
"So," Beatrice sneered, "Lucius and Narcissa Malfoy find the idea of you marrying a half-blood or a muggle-born to be utterly delightful."
Draco girded his occlumency walls as he met her gaze steadily. "Yes, they're perfectly happy with it." She eyed him carefully for several seconds before asking shrewdly,
"Is this about Santiago?"
Now it was Draco's turn to fall silent. What did this witch know? After less than a beat, he asked, "Sorry, what? Who is that?" The old woman moved with slow agility around to the back of a nearby display case, to perch upon a well-worn stool.
"Mr. Malfoy, I knew your father's mother, your grandmother, quite well. I shared a dormitory with Viola Abbott for 7 years at Hogwarts. A lovely girl, so full of wonder and life she was. My best friend, in fact. She was the Ravenclaw prefect my year. She would have been head girl had she not turned down the spot to focus on being Quidditch captain instead. She was a bright and beautiful soul, and she was crushed when her father matched her with Abraxas Malfoy." He moved towards the display and the witch, drawn in by her words. Draco knew nothing about his grandmother. Lucius's mother had died in childbirth, and Abraxas had steadfastly refused to tell his son anything about her. Then Abraxas died soon after Draco was born, taking any knowledge of Viola Abbott Malfoy with him. For some time after they married, Viola and I of course kept in touch as close as we were. Little by little, Abraxas broke her spirit. Viola, she dated a muggle-born wizard at Hogwarts, and Abraxas bullied her mercilessly for this. He never forgot it, never let it go, even though he was the one who had the privilege of marrying her."
The witch stared over Draco's shoulder, as though seeing the suffering she'd witnessed in her friend all over again.
"When she died in childbirth, a part of me thinks she was glad to finally escape."
I never knew that," Draco said hoarsely.
Beatrix nodded. "Abraxas poured every bit of his blood purity beliefs into that boy. And when you know who showed up, Lucius never stood a chance. He was always going to be the first in the queue to join that madman. So, if you would have me believe that your father is allowing you to marry a muggle-born, you must think I was born yesterday."
Draco shook his head. "No, madam, I assure you, I care very much for this witch. Her blood status means nothing to me, absolutely nothing. I would do anything for her, take any measures to protect her, and that includes defending her against my ancestors' misguided ways of thinking." The old witch stared into his eyes, and Draco felt the brush of legitimacy there. Automatically, his occlumency walls strengthened, allowing just enough of the truth to seep through, to satisfy the witch. He did not allow her to see Granger, but she could sense the veracity of his feelings for her all the same.
"Ah, you are in love. It seems like you have been for a long time. Have you already proposed to this witch?"
Draco shook his head. Part of his brain still hung up on the phrase, "in love for a long time." But he pushed those thoughts behind his occlumency walls as he spoke. "No, not officially. We have discussed it." Beatrice frowned now.
"Highly interesting. Esther Greengrass has been a dear friend for years. She called last week to tell me that her youngest was about to become betrothed, but she was very cagey about it. And then I remembered the prophet mentioning your mother entering your vaults for jewelry a day or so after that, so I naturally assumed that she was the object of your affections."
Draco only hummed noncommittally. In less than a month, he and Tori's official engagement announcement would appear in the Daily Prophet, and this witch would be proven right. But for now, he needed to throw her off of her suspicions, and have her believe that he was marrying a Muggleborn.
Beatrice nodded slowly. Draco could tell she wasn't entirely convinced, so he tried to redirect the conversation. "You never told me who Santiago was. Is that your nephew, the one helping to run the shop now?" Beatrice's eyes slid sideways as she held her breath, and Draco's aura senses detected a lie of her own, forming on her lips.
"Yes, Emilio's nephew."
Draco was the one to fall silent now, urging her to go on without speaking.
"Santiago has been very helpful, keeping the business running. Poor Emilio, he's long past the days of inventory, appraising jewelry, keeping the ledger books. He still has his good days, mornings mostly, but by late afternoons most days he's often forgotten who I am. Some days he doesn't remember who he is, either."
Beatrice's eyes were on the rear of the shop, where her husband was possibly making tea, if he'd remembered the task he'd been given. "Madame Delval, I'm very sorry to hear it." Beatrice smiled sadly, the corners of her eyes wet now.
"And I am very sorry to have to say it. It's difficult, seeing the person you love change so much from what you once knew. I've had to mourn my husband before he even dies."
Not knowing what else to say, Draco could only repeat himself. "I am truly sorry."
"When Santiago arrived, he was a godsend for us. I was already struggling to keep the shop going and take care of Emilio. 1,000 times I'd considered closing the doors for good. I'm no spring chicken myself, and it was all getting to be too much."
Beatrice went on.
"Suddenly, here was Santiago. He offered to take over the day-to-day operations of things, worry about the supply and the inventory, leave me to handle the financial side of the business. I was unsure at first. Sometimes I still am. But he's won me over, in many ways."
Draco tilted his head. "You say you're still unsure. Why?" Madame Delval checked the door for the back of the shop once more.
"Because I've kept in touch with Emilio's sister all these years, behind my husband's back. Blanca never married, and she never had a son."
"So, who is Santiago?" He frowned.
"You're an aura, Mr. Malfoy. That's what I'm hoping you can tell me. My husband trusts him implicitly. He bought Santiago's story from the beginning, a few magical photographs, a handful of simple details about Blanca, and Emilio was ready to believe anything Santiago had to say. Luckily for me, Emilio no longer handles any of the financial dealings of our business. Otherwise, he'd have handed everything over to Santiago months ago."
"So, who do you think he is?" Draco asked quietly. That Mrs. Delval suspected Santiago's motives was an unexpected development, and he wasn't sure what to believe now. Beatrice considered.
"I don't know exactly. I worried at first that he was just a run-of-the-mill grifter trying to take our business out from under us. But he only seems interested in selling jewelry. He hasn't asked about our ledgers or accounts at all."
Draco nodded, only a little surprised. Santiago Ruiz wasn't interested in embezzling the life savings of the older couple. He needed the illusion of authenticity that Delval Jewelers provided. Had he operated out of back alleys and cargo ships,
or the back rooms of gambling dens, he would have been found out months ago. But because he used the established shop as a front, he was able to launder stolen diamonds and sell them as legitimate. Once they were mixed into the Del Val inventory, it was far more difficult for the authorities to know which were acquired by valid means and which were stolen. And, to make matters worse, because Santiago Ruiz had no direct connection with the financial side of the business, he could never be prosecuted for laundering of jewels. When he felt as though the authorities were closing in, Ruiz would likely skip town, leaving Emilio and Beatrice Del Val to take the blame. But the more I think about it, the more I'm sure he's up to no good. He's working an angle, I just don't know what it is. The problem is this. He's gotten close to Emilio. Since my husband was no longer handling the finances of the shop, this didn't especially bother me at first. What did it matter, I thought, if this man gave Emilio a bit of comfort in his old age? Santiago made Emilio believe that Blanca had forgiven him, that she had sent her son to help him, and the shop was doing better than it had in years. But you think there's something more that meets the eye? Beatrice's stalwart appearance slowly deflated, shrunken and fearful now. Draco could see exactly how scared the elderly witch was. She whispered, I think there must be. I just don't know what it is, and I don't know how to go about finding out. There was a scuffling noise from the back of the shop, and Emilio Del Val reappeared, holding a tea tray laden with cups and saucers, milk and sugar, as well as a stick of butter and 3 eggs. Lucius, lovely seeing you after all these years, you dapper young man, the old man crowed, shuffling slowly so as not to unbalance the 3 eggs that rolled around on the tray. Emilio, thank you so much. Let me take that from you, Madame Del Val said, accepting the tray graciously from her husband and not remarking on the lack of tea. Madam and Mr. Del Val, any help you can offer me in regards to a suitable engagement gift would be much appreciated, and in return I would of course assist you in any way I can, Draco said, raising an eyebrow towards the older witch significantly. Truthfully, my research into proper engagement gifts for my witch has given me a newfound interest in the business itself. I think it's fascinating how these stones are simply taken from the ground and turned into something so magnificent. He gestured at the display case between them, where all manner of gemstones sparkled under soft magical lights. Beatrice Del Val nodded slowly, her brow crinkling in thought. Perhaps you would benefit from getting to know our nephew, Santiago, she suggested, hesitantly, as though testing out the idea with Draco. Calculating quickly, Draco came to a snap decision. It did seem that Emilio and Beatrice Del Val were being bamboozled by Santiago Ruiz. It would take some work on the part of the DMLE investigators, but if the older couple were potentially innocent, Draco would do all that he could, so that they would not face prosecution for this. The blonde wizard nodded. I think that's a wonderful idea. In fact, I'm thinking of taking my witch on holiday to the south of Spain, somewhere close to where Mr. Del Val's family originated from. Perhaps I can meet up with Santiago there sometime, learn a bit more about the business. Beatrice swallowed hard and sent him a frightened but comprehending look. Santiago, wonderful boy, my nephew, Blanca's boy, Emilio said. The man turned to his wife. Is Santiago here? No, darling, he's in Spain, remember? His wife answered. Exactly how does Santiago get back and forth from Spain to Surrey, I wonder? Draco asked. Eleonora next door might not know. but perhaps the Delvals did. But now they both looked unsure.
"I really couldn't say," Beatrice answered. "Now that I think of it, it does seem odd that he doesn't use the flu."
It did not seem odd to Draco, seeing as the Department of Magical Transportation had been monitoring the Delval's flu for several months. Other than the occasional visit from elderly members of old wizarding families, their flu remained inactive. Santiago Ruiz likely knew that it was being monitored and avoided it at all costs. Draco withdrew a card from his robe pocket, passing it to Beatrice. "Madame Delval, if you come across anything of interest, whether it's jewelry-related or anything else, please keep me apprised. This has my London address, as well as that of my home in Marbella. I'll add you to my wards so that you can reach me by flu." The older witch nodded thoughtfully but said nothing. As though as an afterthought, he withdrew a second card from his pocket. "And perhaps you can give this card to your nephew when you see him. I'll be on holiday in Marbella later this week. I would very much like to meet with him in Spain. Perhaps learn a bit more about the business from him. The jewelry industry seems quite lucrative, and Malfoy Limited is always looking to diversify." Beatrice looked almost frightened as she took this second card, turning it towards the light to compare the two. The card simply read, "Draco Malfoy, Chief Executive Officer, Malfoy Limited, London." On the back, in Draco's neat script, was written, "Villa Salvagno, Calle Azahar." Neither card mentioned Draco's work as an aura, though it was likely that Ruiz already knew this, or at the very least would learn it before contacting Draco. But Draco was counting on the man's greed, taking over his reasoning abilities. Gaining backing from Malfoy Limited would greatly expand the scope of his racket, something Ruiz would be loath to pass up without at least investigating. Draco only had to hope that between Ruiz and Pritchett, the Aura Department's man on the inside of Castigliano's operation, he and Granger would be able to ingratiate themselves with the organization, and bring down the entire ring in the process. He exited Wizarding Guildford and made his way back to the town museum. Inside, the lonely docent pulled him into a lengthy lecture about the utterly boring history of the little town's castle and church. Draco eventually managed to slip into the restroom, glad to apparate away from the place. Once back in Muggle London, he wandered amongst the afternoon shoppers on Bond Street, deep in thought. At Anderson and Shepherd he popped in to get measured for a couple of new Muggle suits for his upcoming visit to Spain. It was going to be a tricky thing, this assignment in Marbella. He'd be stepping back into a world of deceit and criminal subterfuge, so similar to the one he'd escaped over a decade ago. Worse, he was bringing along Granger, who had never sullied herself with anything like this. Thoughts of the witch brought his renewed worries about his tenuous relationship with her. Weaselette seemed to think that he still had something of a chance with her, the idea of which seemed laughable. He'd fucked things up so royally with Granger. Was it repairable? And even if it was, would the witch ever see him the way she apparently once had? Thank you for listening to Proximity by Great78. If you enjoyed this story and would like to listen to more, please subscribe to my podcast, Silver and Copper, on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find a link for this story in the show description, or search Archive of Our Own for
great 78.